The laughter echoed across the Coronado beach like a slap to the face. Colonel Ryan Thornton, a man who'd killed terrorists in 14 countries, was doubled over, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. This is what headquarters sent us. His voice carried across the assembled SEAL teams, 200 of America's deadliest warriors, all staring at the small figure standing at attention. It was 0530 hours, June 15th, 2023, at Naval Special Warfare Command in San Diego, California. 23-year-old Lieutenant Emma Carson didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. But when her sleeve slid up and Thornton saw the burn scars, his laughter died in his throat. Before we begin, if you appreciate stories of courage and redemption, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Stay with us until the end, and comment below with your city name so we can see how far this story travels around the world. The sun hadn't fully risen over the Pacific Ocean, but the heat was already building. Emma Carson stood in formation with 53 other candidates for the Inter-Service Special Operations Assessment, and she absolutely knew that she didn't belong here. Not because she wasn't qualified, because nobody believed she was. Name Huss, the admin clerk, had said when she checked in at 0500 hours. Lieutenant Emma Carson, ma'am, service number. You're in the wrong building, honey. The administrative offices are in Building 7. This is Nisavdar Command, Special Warfare. I know, ma'am. I'm here for the assessment. The clerk had looked her up and down, taking in Emma's 5'3" frame, her 115 pounds, the oversized PT uniform that hung off her shoulders like a child wearing her father's clothes. You sure about that? Emma had learned not to argue. She simply handed over her orders stamped and signed by SOCOM headquarters itself. Now standing in formation as Colonel Ryan Thornton prowled down the line like a predator selecting prey. Emma kept her eyes forward and tried to make herself invisible. It never worked. Thornton stopped directly in front of her. He was 6'2", built like a boxer despite his 52 years, with gray hair, buzzed military short, and eyes the color of winter ice. His uniform was covered with badges and ribbons that represented 28 years of classified operations across 4 continents. The SEAL trident on his chest looked like it had been welded there permanently. You? He said. Sir. What's your name, sweetheart? Emma's jaw tightened. Lieutenant Emma Carson, sir. Lieutenant? Thornton repeated, his voice dripping with theatrical skepticism. He turned to address the assembled warriors behind him. Gentlemen, we have a lieutenant here. Someone at headquarters looked at this tiny little thing and decided she belongs with Navy SEALs. Laughter rippled through the formation. Not kind laughter. The cruel, cutting kind that military men use to establish hierarchy. Sir, I'm here under direct orders from— I don't care if you're here under orders from God himself, Thornton interrupted. Look at you. You're what, 5'3", maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. You look like someone's kid sister who wandered onto the base looking for daddy. More laughter. Emma felt her face heating, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd developed that skill over 3 years of classified operations where showing emotion meant death. What's your MOS, Lieutenant? Thornton asked. That's classified, sir. Classified, Thornton repeated, turning to his audience again. Everything's classified when you're not qualified for anything real. Let me guess. Intelligence analyst, staff officer, someone's diversity hire to make headquarters feel progressive. No, sir. Then what? Emma's voice remained steady. I'm not authorized to discuss my service history, sir. My orders are verified. I'm here to complete the assessment. Thornton stepped closer, close enough that Emma could smell coffee and tobacco on his breath. You want to play with the big boys, little girl? Fine. We'll see how long you last. He turned to his second-in-command, Master Chief Jake Torres, a Hispanic SEAL with 22 years of service and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Torres, what's first on today's agenda? Physical assessment, sir. Pull-ups, timed run obstacle course, and underwater confidence test. Perfect. Thornton's smile was predatory. Lieutenant Carson here is going to demonstrate for us. Show us what headquarters considers combat-ready these days. Emma's stomach dropped, but she said nothing. Carson front and center by the pull-up bars. She moved with precise military bearing, each step measured, keeping her face blank. The pull-up bars stood in the center of the training area, surrounded by sand and morning shadows. Around her, the male candidates, Army Rangers, Marine, Recon, Air Force, Pararescue, and SEALs, watched with expressions ranging from amusement to outright hostility. "Standard requirement is 20 pull-ups," Thornton announced. "But I'm feeling generous this morning. Lieutenant Carson, if you can give me 15, I'll apologize for doubting you. If you can't, you're on the first transport back to wherever headquarters scraped you from." "Sir, regulations state that candidates are allowed to change into properly fitted PT gear before—" "Did I ask you about regulations, Lieutenant?" "No, sir." "Then grab the bar." Emma looked up at the pull-up bar, calculating. The oversized shirt would restrict her movement, the baggy shorts would throw off her center of gravity, and performing in front of 200 hostile spectators would make every muscle fiber scream with tension. She'd done harder things. Much harder. She jumped, caught the bar, and pulled herself up. The first 5 were easy despite the clothes. Her body remembered the rhythm, the breathing, the way to engage her core to reduce shoulder strain. The laughter from the crowd continued. At 10 pull-ups, some of the laughter faltered. A few candidates exchanged glances. At 15, Thornton's smile faded. At 20, the training area had gone silent, except for Emma's controlled breathing. At 25, Master Chief Torres muttered, "Holy shit." Emma didn't stop. Somewhere around pull-up number 18, her oversized sleeve had started sliding down her left forearm. By pull-up 30, it had slipped completely to her elbow, revealing what she'd kept hidden beneath the baggy clothes. Burn scars. Thick, ropey, discolored scar tissue that covered her entire forearm from wrist to elbow. The kind of scars that came from prolonged exposure to intense heat. The kind that made medical professionals wince and ask uncomfortable questions. Emma completed 32 pull-ups before dropping to the sand, her breathing elevated but controlled. She immediately pulled her sleeve back down, but the damage was done. Every man in the training area had seen. Thornton stared at her, his theatrical mockery replaced by something else. Confusion, maybe, or the first hint of doubt. "Where did you get those scars, Lieutenant?" "Afghanistan, sir." "Afghanistan," Thornton repeated slowly. "Doing what, riding in a convoy that hit an IED?" Emma's voice remained flat. "No, sir." "Then what?" "That's classified, sir." The crowd murmured. Classified meant operational. Operational meant she'd been downrange in the shit, doing things that most staff officers never saw in their entire careers. And Emma was 23 years old. "How long ago?" Thornton demanded. 3 years, sir." The murmuring grew louder. 3 years ago, Emma would have been 20. Barely old enough to drink legally in the United States, but apparently old enough to earn burn scars in Afghanistan. "Torres, what's next?" Thornton's voice had lost some of its swagger. "Timed run, sir. 4 miles full gear." "Skip it. Take her to the pool." "Sir." "The pool, Master Chief. Underwater confidence test. Let's see how confident our little lieutenant really is." The SEAL training facility's pool was 50 meters long and 15 feet deep, kept at a frigid 60 degrees to simulate ocean conditions. Emma stood on the deck in borrowed swim gear, a Navy PT swimsuit that actually fit, while Thornton outlined the test. 50-meter underwater swim. No touching the bottom, no surfacing until you reach the end. Fail and you're done here. "Sir, standard procedure is to have a safety diver." "Are you questioning my safety protocols, Lieutenant?" Emma looked at the water, then back at Thornton. His eyes were challenging her, daring her to refuse. She could refuse. She had that right. But refusing meant confirming every doubt, every dismissive laugh, every assumption that she didn't belong. "No, sir." She dove in. The cold hit her like a fist, driving the air from her lungs. She forced herself to stay calm, to control her breathing, to let her body adjust. The pool bottom was visible below her, painted blue and marked with lines. She began to swim. Halfway across, her lungs started burning. 3/4 of the way, her vision began to narrow. The old scars on her body, not just her arms, but her back, her legs, places the swimsuit didn't cover, felt tight in the cold water. She surfaced at the 50-meter mark, gasping but triumphant. The pool deck had erupted in noise. Not laughter this time. Shock. Because when Emma climbed out of the water, her back was fully visible, and her back was a roadmap of trauma. Shrapnel scars, dozens of them, scattered across her shoulder blades like buckshot, burn tissue thick and ropey covering her lower back, and two distinct circular scars, perfectly round on her left side below her ribs. Bullet wounds, entry and exit. Every man on that pool deck knew what bullet wounds looked like. You didn't spend years in special operations without seeing them, but seeing them on a 23-year-old woman who weighed 115 pounds soaking wet, that was different. Thornton stood frozen, staring. Master Chief Torres, a combat veteran of 3 wars, walked up to Emma slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "Ma'am, what unit were you with?" "That's classified, Master Chief." "Those are combat wounds." "Yes, Master Chief." "From Afghanistan." "Yes, Master Chief." Torres looked at Thornton, his expression saying what his words couldn't in front of the candidates. "We fucked up. We fucked up bad." But Thornton wasn't ready to admit anything. His face had gone red, whether from embarrassment or anger, Emma couldn't tell. "Get dressed, Lieutenant. You've got obstacle course in 20 minutes. Emma grabbed a towel and headed toward the women's locker room, aware that every eye in the facility was tracking her movement. The whispers had already started. "Did you see her back? Those are bullet holes, man. Both sides. Went clean through." How the hell is she even alive? What was she doing in Afghanistan? In the locker room, Emma sat on the bench and let herself shake for exactly 30 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. 30 seconds to feel the fear, the memory, the ghost of pain that lived in those scars. Then she locked it down, stood up, and got dressed. When she emerged, a young SEAL was waiting for her. He couldn't have been more than 25 with the lean build of a distance runner and eyes that had seen too much for his age. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant James Rourke. I wanted to apologize for laughing earlier." "We didn't know." "You don't know now, Lieutenant. You've seen scars, that's all." "Those aren't just scars, ma'am. I've been deployed 6 times. I know combat wounds when I see them." Emma shouldered her gear bag. "Then you know they're not for casual conversation." She walked past him, heading for the obstacle course, but Rourke followed. "Ma'am, can I ask you something off the record?" "No." "How old were you when you got those injuries?" Emma stopped walking, turned to face him. 20 years old, Lieutenant. I was 20 years old." Rourke's face went pale. Jesus Christ. His name didn't come up much during that deployment. Emma's voice was hard. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got an obstacle course to run." The obstacle course was a sadistic collection of walls, ropes, monkey bars, and other implements designed to break bodies and spirits. It stretched for half a mile through sand, mud, and wood structures that had been engineered to maximize suffering. Thornton was waiting at the starting line with 20 male candidates. The morning's mockery had been replaced by something more dangerous, determined skepticism. He needed Emma to fail, now needed to prove that the scars didn't matter, that she was still unqualified, still not one of them. "New rule, gentlemen," Thornton announced. "First person to finish the course gets the rest of the day off. Last person does the whole thing again. Lieutenant Carson, since you're so impressive with pull-ups and underwater swimming, why don't you show us how you handle obstacles?" The candidates lined up. Emma positioned herself in the middle of the pack, not trying to stand out. She'd learned that lesson in Afghanistan. Sometimes survival meant invisibility. Go. 21 candidates exploded forward. The first obstacle was a 7-foot wall that required upper body strength and technique. Emma watched 2 candidates ahead of her struggle with it, their larger frames working against them. She timed her approach, used her momentum, and scaled it in 3 seconds. The second obstacle was a rope climb 30 feet straight up. Her shoulders screamed in protest. The old injuries hated this particular movement, but she forced herself upward, hand over hand, ignoring the pain. She passed 3 candidates on the rope. The third obstacle was a crawl through mud under barbed wire. Here, her small size was an advantage. While the bigger men had to press themselves flat to avoid the wire, Emma slithered through like a snake, gaining more ground. By the halfway point, she was in 3rd place. The 2 men ahead of her were both SEALs, both over 6 feet tall, both visibly struggling to believe that the tiny woman was keeping pace with them. The monkey bars were next. 40 feet of hand-over-hand movement, with only sand below. This was where Emma's old shoulder injury would cost her. She could feel it with every reach, every grab, the joint protesting the muscles, not quite firing correctly. She was at 30 feet, arms trembling, when her left hand slipped. She dropped, caught herself with her right hand, and hung suspended. Her shoulder popped, a sickening sound that several candidates heard clearly. Pain shot through her arm like electricity. "She's done," someone muttered behind her. Emma gritted her teeth, reached up with her left arm despite the agony, and kept going. Right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. 10 more feet. 5 more feet. She dropped to the sand at the end of the bars and immediately fell to one knee, cradling her left shoulder. Thornton appeared beside her. "That's enough, Lieutenant. Medical tent is that way." Emma stood up. "I'm finishing the course, sir." "Your shoulder is..." "I'm finishing the course." The remaining obstacles blurred together. A wall climb, a tire flip, a weighted sled drag. Emma's left arm was barely functional, forcing her right side to compensate. She dropped to 8th place, then 10th, then 15th. With 100 meters to go, only 6 candidates remained behind her. The finish line was visible ahead. Emma's legs felt like concrete. Her left shoulder was on fire. The oversized PT shirt was soaked with sweat and sticking to the scars on her back. She crossed the finish line in 16th place out of 21 candidates, and immediately collapsed. Master Chief Torres was there first, medic bag in hand. "Don't move, ma'am. Let me check that shoulder." Emma tried to push herself up. "I'm fine." "Like hell you are. Stay down." Torres's hands were gentle but professional as he examined her shoulder. "It's dislocated. We need to pop it back in." "Then do it." "We should transport you to medical. Let them..." "Do it here, Master Chief." "I'm not leaving this course on a stretcher." Torres looked at Thornton, who had walked over. The colonel's face was unreadable. "Your call, Torres," Thornton said quietly. The Master Chief nodded. "Okay, ma'am. This is going to hurt. A lot. Lieutenant Rourke, hold her steady." Rourke knelt behind Emma, bracing her good shoulder. Torres gripped her left arm. "On 3, Torres said. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. The joint popped back into place with a sound like a branch breaking. Emma's vision went white. She didn't scream, but she did make a sound, a choked gasp that sounded like someone drowning. "Done," Torres said. "You need to ice that and rest it for at least..." Emma stood up, swayed slightly, steadied herself. "Thank you, Master Chief." She walked away from the obstacle course, past the candidates who had finished before her, past the ones who had finished after her passed. Thornton, who watched her go with an expression that might have been respect, or might have been something else entirely. She made it to the locker room before her legs gave out. She sat on the floor back against the cold tile wall and let herself feel it. The pain, the exhaustion, the humiliation of being mocked, the triumph of proving herself, the terror of being seen, of having her scars exposed. Her past revealed bit by bit to strangers who didn't understand and couldn't understand. The door opened. Emma expected another candidate, maybe Master Chief Torres, checking on her. Instead, a woman walked in. She was in her mid-40s, built like a gymnast, with red hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen their share of combat. Her uniform identified her as Master Chief Sarah Vega, and the seal trident on her chest was real, one of the first women to earn it. "Lieutenant Carson." Emma tried to stand. Vega waved her down. "Stay seated. I'm not here as your evaluator. I'm here as someone who's had her shoulder dislocated 3 times in the field and knows what you're feeling right now." She sat down on the floor next to Emma, which was so unexpected that Emma didn't know how to respond. "I watched your performance today," Vega continued. "The pull-ups, the swim, the obstacle course, and I saw your scars." Emma said nothing. "I've been doing this for 22 years, Vega said. "I've seen a lot of combat wounds. Those aren't typical wounds, Lieutenant. Those are the kind of scars that come with a story. The kind of story that usually ends with a medal ceremony and a flag-draped coffin. I'm not dead, Master Chief." "No, you're not." "Which makes me wonder what the hell you survived, and why a 23-year-old woman has scars that would make a 40-year-old SEAL look twice." Emma met her eyes. "I'm not authorized to discuss my service history." "I know. I pulled your file, or I tried to. Turns out your file is about 90% redacted. Your entire service history from age 19 to 22 is just black bars and classified operation stamps. The only things not redacted are your medical records, and those read like something from a horror movie. Emma's jaw tightened. Third-degree burns over 35% of your body, Vega continued quietly. 2 gunshot wounds, fractured vertebrae, shrapnel injuries to your back, legs, and left arm. Multiple surgeries, 8 months in Walter Reed. And all of this happened when you were 20 years old. She paused. What the hell were you doing, Lieutenant? Serving my country, Master Chief. Don't give me that recruiting poster bullshit. I've served my country for 2 decades. I've never seen injuries like yours on someone so young. Those are the kind of wounds that come from being in the shit, deep in the shit, the kind of operations that don't exist on paper. Emma stood up, cradling her left shoulder. Is there a point to this conversation, Master Chief? Vega stood as well. The point is that Colonel Thornton is out there right now trying to figure out how to justify kicking you out of this assessment. He's embarrassed. You made him look like a fool in front of his men, and men like Thornton don't handle embarrassment well. Then I'll fail out. I'm sure he'll be satisfied. You're not going to fail out. Vega's voice was hard. You're going to pass. You're going to pass because I'm not going to let him kick you out based on his wounded ego. But I need to know what I'm defending. I need to know who you really are. You want to know who I am? Emma's voice finally cracked just slightly. I'm someone who was stupid enough to volunteer for a mission that got 6 people killed. I'm someone who spent 47 days being tortured by Taliban fighters who wanted information I couldn't give them. I'm someone who escaped by killing 3 men with a piece of broken chair leg and then walked 40 kilometers through mountains with burns covering a third of my body. I'm someone who spent her 21st birthday in a hospital bed screaming through wound debridement because the painkillers weren't strong enough. That's who I am, Master Chief. Is that enough context for you? The locker room went silent. Vega's face had gone pale. Jesus Christ. He wasn't there either. Emma grabbed her gear bag. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to ice my shoulder before tomorrow's assessment. She walked out, leaving Vega standing alone in the locker room. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma iced her shoulder for 2 hours, attended a mandatory briefing on safety protocols, and ate dinner alone in the mess hall while other candidates ate in groups, occasionally glancing her way and whispering. She was finishing her meal when Lieutenant Rourke approached her table. Ma'am, mind if I sit? Emma gestured to the empty chair. Free country. Rourke sat, but didn't eat. Just studied her with those old young eyes. What happened to you in Afghanistan? He finally asked. That's classified. I know, but everyone's talking. They're saying you were CIA, that you were a paramilitary officer, that you ran black operations. Emma took a drink of water. They can say whatever they want. Were they wrong? She met his eyes. Would it matter if they were right? It would matter to me, Rourke said quietly. I lost friends in Afghanistan, good men, SEALs who died doing missions that officially never happened. If you were part of that world, if you were out there doing the same kind of work, then... He trailed off. Then I owe you an apology for more than just laughing this morning. Emma pushed her tray away. You don't owe me anything, Lieutenant. We all volunteer for this. We all know the risks. You volunteered when you were 19 years old. 18, actually. I joined at 18, deployed at 19. Rourke stared at her. That's not possible. CIA doesn't recruit that young. The paramilitary program requires years of military experience before... I didn't say I was CIA. You didn't deny it either. Emma stood up. Good night, Lieutenant. She walked away, leaving Rourke sitting alone at the table, trying to put together pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit any pattern he knew. That night, Emma lay in her bunk in the female candidate barracks, a small building separate from the main barracks housing only 3 women out of the 54 candidates. The other 2 women were Army Rangers, both in their late 20s, both career soldiers who'd earned their slots through years of conventional service. They'd tried to talk to Emma earlier to build camaraderie, to establish the kind of bond that women in male-dominated fields relied on for survival. Emma had politely deflected every attempt. She didn't do camaraderie. Not anymore. At 0300 hours, Emma woke up screaming. She was back in the compound. Back in the room with the concrete floor and the single light bulb. Back with the smell of diesel fuel and blood. Back with the sound of footsteps approaching the door, opening the questions in Pashto that she'd pretended not to understand. Lieutenant Carson. Hands on her shoulders, shaking her gently. Emma's eyes snapped open. She was on the floor between the bunks, pressed into the corner, her hands raised in a defensive position. One of the Army Rangers, Captain Michelle Torres, no relation to the Master Chief, was kneeling in front of her, keeping her distance, her voice calm and professional. "You're at Coronado, Lieutenant. Naval Special Warfare Command. You're safe. It's June 16th, 2023. You're in California." Emma's breathing was ragged. She could feel sweat soaking through her PT shirt, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm fine," she managed. "You're not fine. You just had a hell of a nightmare." Torres sat back on her heels. "How often does this happen? Doesn't matter. It matters if it affects your performance. You can't complete this assessment if you're not sleeping." Emma forced herself to stand to move away from the corner. "I said I'm fine, Captain." Torres exchanged a glance with the other woman, First Lieutenant Amy Chen, who was sitting up in her bunk looking concerned. "This happened last night too," Chen said quietly. "We didn't say anything because we figured you needed privacy. But Emma, if you're dealing with PTSD, I'm not." "The hell you're not," Torres said, her voice sharper. "I've seen PTSD. I've treated it. Those were Arabic words you were screaming. What were you saying?" Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, forcing them still. "I was saying, I don't know. Over and over, in Dari." The room went silent. "Why were you speaking, Dari?" Chen asked. Emma didn't answer. She walked to the bathroom, closed the door, and stood under a cold shower for 20 minutes, letting the water wash away the sweat and the memories and the phantom smell of diesel fuel that existed only in her mind. When she emerged, the other women were awake, sitting on their bunks, waiting. "We're not going to report this," Torres said. "We're not going to say anything to Thornton or anyone else. But you need to know that we've got your back. Whatever happened to you, whatever you're dealing with, you're not alone." Emma wanted to tell them that she was alone, that she'd always been alone since the moment her team had been ambushed, and she'd been the only one to survive. But instead, she just nodded. "Thank you, Captain." She lay back down on her bunk, knowing she wouldn't sleep again. Knowing that tomorrow would bring more tests, more pain, more opportunities for Thornton to find reasons to disqualify her. But she'd survived worse than Colonel Ryan Thornton. She'd survived 47 days in hell. She could survive a few more days of doubt. At 0530 hours, the candidates assembled for the morning briefing. Thornton stood at the front, Master Chief Torres at his side, studying the group with cold assessment. "Yesterday's performance was enlightening," Thornton began. "Some of you exceeded expectations, some of you met them, and some of you," his eyes landed on Emma, "raised questions." Emma kept her face blank. "Today's assessment will be different. We're going to test something that physical training can't prepare you for. We're going to test your ability to think under pressure, to make decisions when the information is incomplete, and to lead when leadership means risking everything." He nodded to Torres, who pulled up a tactical map on the projection screen. "This is a simulated hostage rescue scenario. You'll be divided into teams of 7. Each team will have 45 minutes to plan and execute a rescue of 2 hostages being held in Building 12. The enemy force will be played by instructors. The hostages will be played by volunteers. Your performance will be graded on tactical effectiveness, decision-making under pressure, and your ability to adapt when the plan fails." Emma's heart rate picked up. This was familiar territory. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd done in real life when the stakes were measured in actual lives instead of training scores. "Team assignments are on the board," Thornton continued. "You have 2 hours to plan. Execution begins at 1,000 hours. The candidates crowded around the assignment board. Emma found her name, Team 3. She scanned the other 6 names and felt her stomach drop. Captain Derek Hammond, Lieutenant James Rourke, 3 other male candidates she didn't know, and one notation that made her blood run cold: Team Leader L.T. Carson. She'd been deliberately set up. Thornton had put her in charge of a team of men who either doubted her or actively wanted her to fail. If she succeeded, it would be despite them. If she failed, it would confirm everything Thornton wanted to believe. Emma walked to the planning area where her team was assembling. Hammond saw her first, and his expression was pure disgust. "You've got to be kidding me," he said loud enough for nearby teams to hear. "We get the girl with the mystery scars as our team leader." "The colonel made the assignment captain," Emma said evenly. "Unless you'd like to lodge a formal complaint and waste both our planning time." Hammond's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Emma turned to the rest of the team. "Let's see the building layout. We've got 2 hours, and I don't intend to waste a single minute of it proving myself to anyone. We're going to plan this mission, execute it flawlessly, and extract those hostages before the other teams are halfway through their approach. Is that clear?" Rourke nodded slowly. "Clear, ma'am." The other team members exchanged glances but followed suit. Emma spread the tactical map on the table. "Now let's talk about how we're actually going to do this." And for the first time since arriving at Coronado, she felt something other than fear or pain or exhaustion. She felt purpose. The planning room smelled like stale coffee and tension. Emma spread the building schematics across the table while her team gathered around their body language, screaming resistance. Hammond stood with his arms crossed, his jaw set in a hard line. The others: Staff Sergeant Miguel Santos, Petty Officer First Class David Chen, and Corporal Jason Webb, waited to see how this would play out. Building 12 has 3 entry points. Emma began, her finger tracing the layout. Main entrance here, service door on the north side, and a roof access hatch. The hostages are being held in room 2B, second floor eastern corner. "How do you know that?" Hammond interrupted. Emma didn't look up. "Because if I were holding hostages in that building, that's where I'd put them. Corner room, only 1 window maximum distance from all entry points. Forces any rescue team to expose themselves crossing open hallways." "That's speculation. That's tactical thinking based on..." Emma stopped herself. She'd been about to say, based on experience holding defensive positions in hostile territory, but that would raise questions she couldn't answer. "Based on the building layout. Look at it yourself, Captain. Where would you put high-value targets?" Hammond studied the map, his expression sour. "Same place. Doesn't mean you're right." "Then we'll plan for multiple scenarios. Rourke, you're good with entry tactics." The young SEAL nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I've run 37 building clearances in Iraq and Syria." "Then your lead on the breach. Santos, what's your background?" The Army Ranger straightened slightly. "Sniper, ma'am. 12 years, multiple deployments." "Your Overwatch." "Chen?" "Demolitions, ma'am." "Webb." "Combat medic." Emma nodded, her mind already running through scenarios, calculating angles and timing, and the 1,000 variables that separated successful operations from catastrophic failures. "Here's what we're going to do." Santos takes position on Building 7's roof, with clear sight lines to our target building. Chen preps charges for the service door quiet breaches. Nothing that alerts the entire compound. Webb positions himself at the rally point with medical gear ready. Rourke and Hammond stack up for entry with me. We go in fast, silent, and we extract both hostages before the opposition knows we're there. "And who put you in charge of tactics?" Hammond's voice was sharp. Emma finally looked at him directly. "Colonel Thornton did when he assigned me team leader. You have a problem with that captain, take it up with him. We've got 90 minutes left, and I'm not spending them on a pissing contest." The room went silent. Even Hammond seemed taken aback by the steel in her voice. Rourke cleared his throat. "Ma'am, what about contingencies if the hostages aren't where you think they are?" "Then we adapt. Building clearance room by room, standard tactics. But we go in assuming I'm right, because hesitation kills more operators than bad intelligence." For the next hour, Emma walked her team through the plan with a precision that surprised them. She knew building layouts, understood firing angles, anticipated enemy responses with the kind of tactical intuition that came from experience. Real experience, not just training. Hammond watched her with growing confusion. This wasn't a staff officer playing tactical genius. This was someone who'd done this before. At 09:45 hours, Thornton appeared in the planning room. Time's up. All teams to the staging area. Emma's team filed out equipment, checked and double-checked. As they walked toward Building 12, Hammond fell into step beside her. Where did you learn that? Learn what, Captain? Tactical planning. You broke down that building like you'd assaulted it before, like you'd actually been in combat, not just read about it in a manual. Emma kept walking. I pay attention in training. Bullshit. I've been doing this for 12 years. You don't get that kind of instinct from training. Then maybe I'm just naturally talented. They reached the staging area where the other teams were preparing. Thornton stood on an elevated platform, Master Chief Torres beside him, both watching the candidates with predatory focus. Rules of engagement, Thornton announced. Simulated weapons only. Instructors playing enemy forces will use marking rounds. You get hit, you're out of the exercise. Hostages are equipped with sensors. You injure a hostage, you fail. You leave a hostage behind, you fail. You exceed your 45-minute time limit, you fail. Any questions? No one spoke. Team 1, you're up first. Everybody else observe and learn. Team 1's assault was textbook. They breached through the main entrance, cleared rooms systematically, and extracted both hostages in 32 minutes. Competent, efficient, but slow. Team 2 tried something more aggressive, simultaneous breach from 2 entry points. It went badly. They triggered the opposition too early, got pinned down in a stairwell, and exceeded their time limit before extracting even 1 hostage. Team 3, Thornton called. Let's see what Lieutenant Carson's planned for us. Emma felt every eye in the compound turned toward her. This was it. This was where she either proved herself or confirmed every doubt. Santos, you're moving to Overwatch position now. Radio check when you're set. The Ranger nodded and disappeared toward Building 7. Emma turned to Chen. Charge is ready. Yes, ma'am. Set for silent breach, 30-second delay. Good. Hammond, Rourke with me. Webb rally point is here. We'll bring the hostages to you. They moved into position. Emma's shoulder ached. It always ached after stress, but she forced herself to ignore it. Pain was information, nothing more. Her radio crackled. Overwatch set. I've got eyes on target, building 3 tangos visible through window 2nd floor. Copy. Chen place charges and fall back to support position. Roger that. Emma checked her watch. Breach in 60 seconds. Her heart rate was climbing, but her hands were steady. This wasn't Afghanistan. This wasn't real. But her body didn't know the difference. Her body remembered rooms that needed clearing, enemies that needed eliminating, hostages that needed saving. 30 seconds. Hammond was watching her. You okay, Lieutenant? You look pale. I'm fine. You sure? Because if you're going to freeze up in there. I said I'm fine, Captain. 10 seconds. The explosion was a muffled thump, barely audible beyond the immediate area. The service door blew inward. Emma moved through it before the smoke cleared her weapon, up her training taking over. First room clear, second room clear, stairwell ahead. Moving to 2nd floor. She took the stairs fast. Rourke and Hammond stacked behind her. At the top, a hallway stretched to the left. Room 2B was at the end, exactly where she'd predicted. 2 instructors playing enemy forces appeared from side rooms. Emma's weapon barked twice, marking rounds, but her muscle memory was pulling triggers that had once fired real bullets. Both instructors went down, marked by simulated hits. Tango down, tango down. Moving to target room. She reached the door. Locked. Chen, we need this door open. Breaching charge will alert everyone in the building, ma'am. Do it anyway. Time's more important than stealth now. Another explosion, smaller this time. The door flew open. Inside, 2 volunteers playing hostages were zip-tied to chairs, looking appropriately terrified. Emma was moving toward them when her radio erupted with Santos's voice. Contact 3 tangos moving to your position from the western hallway. They're flanking you. This wasn't part of the planned scenario. Thornton was adapting, testing how they'd respond to changing conditions. Hammond, hold this room. Rourke with me. Emma spun back toward the hallway. 3 instructors were advancing their weapons up. In training, you were supposed to take cover, assess the situation, call for backup. Emma didn't do any of those things. She charged directly at them. It was insane, tactically unsound, exactly the kind of aggressive move that worked in real combat, when surprise mattered more than caution. The instructors hesitated for half a second, just long enough. Emma's weapon came up 3 quick shots, center mass on each target. All 3 instructors looked down at the marking rounds on their chests, stunned. "Clear," Emma said into her radio, breathing hard. "Rourke, help Hammond with the hostages. We're moving." They had the hostages untied and moving within 90 seconds. Webb met them at the rally point, did a quick medical assessment of the volunteers, and gave a thumbs up. "All hostages secured, no injuries," Emma reported. "Requesting permission to RTB." Thornton's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Exercise complete. Team 3, 28 minutes, both hostages secured, 0 casualties. Outstanding performance." Emma's team was still processing what had happened. Santos climbed down from his overwatch position, shaking his head. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 12 years. I've never seen someone charge 3 armed tangos in a confined space and survive. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever witnessed." Emma removed her training helmet. "It wasn't brave or stupid, Sergeant. It was necessary. They had angles on us. In 3 more seconds, they'd have had clear shots. I eliminated the threat before they could take initiative." "That's some high-speed shit, ma'am. Where'd you learn to think that fast?" Emma didn't answer. She walked toward Thornton, who was descending from the observation platform with an unreadable expression. "Lieutenant Carson, I need to speak with you, privately." Hammond stepped forward. "Sir, if this is about the tactics she used, I can vouch that it's not about tactics, Captain. Carson with me, now." Emma followed Thornton into a small office adjacent to the training area. Master Chief Torres was already there, and sitting in a chair against the wall was a man Emma didn't recognize. Civilian clothes, hard eyes, the kind of face that belonged to someone who worked in shadows. "Lieutenant Carson," Thornton said slowly, "this is James Cross. He says he knows you." Emma's blood went cold. She kept her face blank, but her mind was racing. Cross. James Cross, her old handler. The man who'd recruited her at 18, trained her for 6 months, and then sent her into Afghanistan with a fake identity and a prayer. "Sir, I've never met this man." Cross smiled thinly. "It's okay, Lieutenant. Your cover's already blown. These gentlemen pulled your file, or tried to. When they hit the classified walls, they reached out through channels. Those channels led to me." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Emma," Cross said quietly, using her first name like a weapon. "It's over. They know. Not everything, but enough. And after that performance out there charging 3 armed opponents like some kind of action hero, you're not exactly maintaining a low profile." Thornton's voice was ice. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on? Because I've got a 23-year-old lieutenant with combat scars that would make a Delta operator wince, classified service history and tactical instincts that suggest she's done this before. For real." Cross looked at Emma. "Your call. But I think these men have earned the truth." Emma sat down heavily in a chair. Her shoulder was throbbing. Her hands were shaking again. She'd known this moment would come eventually. She'd just hoped it would be later. "My name is Emma Carson. I was recruited by the CIA's Special Activities Division when I was 18 years old. I spent 6 months in training at Camp Peary, then deployed to Afghanistan as part of a paramilitary team operating under diplomatic cover." Thornton's face had gone pale. "You were a kid. I was qualified. I spoke Dari and Pashto fluently. My parents were aid workers in Afghanistan when I was growing up. I spent half my childhood there. I was small female and looked even younger than my age. I could go places male operators couldn't. I could blend in. I was useful." "You were 19 years old." "I was 19 when everything went to hell," Emma corrected quietly. "I was 18 for the first 7 months. Those went fine." Torres stepped forward. "The scars, the burns, the bullet wounds." "That happened during an operation," Cross answered when Emma didn't. "Operation Copper Dagger. Extraction of a high-value intelligence asset who'd been providing information on Taliban senior leadership. Emma's team was ambushed during the extraction. 6 operators killed in the first 30 seconds. Emma already wounded drew enemy fire away from the extraction point so the asset could escape. She was captured. The room went absolutely silent. "How long?" Thornton's voice was barely a whisper. 47 days, Emma said. They held me for 47 days. They wanted to know who I was working for, who our sources were, what operations we were running. I couldn't tell them. Wouldn't tell them. The burns, Torres said. That's not from an explosion. No, that's from electrical cables, car batteries. They'd wet me down with water and then... Emma's voice trailed off. It doesn't matter. The point is, I didn't break. I gave them nothing. And on day 47, I killed 3 guards and escaped. Cross took over again. She walked 40 kilometers through hostile territory with burns covering 35% of her body, 2 gunshot wounds, and a fractured spine. She navigated by stars, ate insects for protein, and reached a friendly compound 3 days later. The medics who treated her said she should have been dead 5 times over. Jesus Christ, Hammond whispered from the doorway. Emma hadn't noticed him there, but apparently he'd followed and been listening. After that, Cross continued, Emma spent 8 months at Walter Reed, 14 surgeries, physical therapy, psychological evaluation, and the moment she was cleared for duty, she requested to return to the field. Why? Thornton asked. Why would you want to go back after that? Emma met his eyes. Because my team died getting that asset out. Because 6 people gave their lives for a mission I volunteered for. Because sitting in a hospital room in Maryland wasn't going to honor their sacrifice. Because I was still useful. And were you useful? Cross answered again. She ran 12 more operations over the next 18 months. All successful. All high risk. She became one of our most effective operators, specifically because of what she'd survived. She understood interrogation resistance. She understood pain management. She understood how to function when every instinct was screaming at you to quit. Then why is she here? Torres asked. Why is she going through SEAL assessment if she's already proven herself in actual combat? Because I'm 23 years old, Emma said flatly. Because the CIA decided I was too young, too traumatized, too much of a liability after my last operation went sideways. Because they thanked me for my service and forced me into early retirement. Because I've spent the last 6 months in a desk job at SOCOM headquarters filing reports and dying slowly of boredom. Because I'm still useful, Master Chief, even if the agency doesn't think so. What happened on your last operation? Thornton asked. Emma's jaw tightened. That's classified. Everything about you is classified. Then maybe you should stop asking questions you're not cleared to hear the answers to, sir. Cross stood up. I'll answer that one. Syria, 8 months ago. Emma was running a solo intelligence operation in Damascus, posing as a French journalist. She identified and located 3 American hostages being held by a splinter terrorist group. She called in the location, waited for extraction authorization. It didn't come fast enough. The terrorists were going to execute the hostages that night. So Emma went in alone, killed 4 armed guards with a knife, and extracted 2 of the 3 hostages herself. The 3rd had already been executed. Alone. Hammond's voice cracked. She assaulted a terrorist safe house alone. I had no choice, Emma said quietly. They were going to die. I couldn't let that happen. You almost died, Cross corrected. You took a round to the hip, another to your left shoulder. Yes, that shoulder that you keep favoring. You carried 2 hostages through hostile streets for 6 blocks before a CIA extraction team reached you. You spent 3 weeks in a military hospital in Germany, and when you recovered, the agency decided you were too reckless, too emotionally compromised to continue field operations. So they put me behind a desk, Emma finished bitterly. Writing reports about operations I should still be running. Watching other people do the work I trained for. That's why I'm here, Colonel. I'm trying to prove I still belong in the field. That I can still do this. Thornton sat down behind the desk, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. You charged 3 armed instructors in a training exercise. That wasn't tactical thinking. That was muscle memory from actual combat. Yes, sir. You knew exactly where those hostages would be because you've actually cleared buildings looking for actual hostages. Yes, sir. And your performance this morning, the pull-ups, the obstacle course with a dislocated shoulder, that's not determination. That's trauma conditioning. You've trained your body to ignore pain because ignoring pain kept you alive. Emma said nothing. Thornton looked at Torres, then at Cross, then back at Emma. I owe you an apology, Lieutenant. I mocked you. I laughed at you. I called you a child playing soldier, and you're actually one of the most experienced combat operators in this entire assessment. I don't need an apology, sir. I need to know if I'm still in the assessment, or if my cover being blown means I'm disqualified. Disqualified? Thornton's laugh was harsh. Lieutenant, you just ran the most effective hostage rescue I've seen in my entire career. Your team would follow you into hell after that performance. Hammond out there looks like he's seen a ghost. Why would I disqualify you? Because I lied on my application, sir. Because my service history is classified and I couldn't provide accurate information about my background. Because I'm not really here to assess for SEAL training, I'm here to prove to the CIA that I'm still operationally viable. Cross spoke up. That's not entirely true, Emma. You're here because SOCOM requested you specifically. There's a joint task force being formed combining CIA paramilitary officers with SEAL operators for high-risk missions. They wanted someone with your experience, your language skills, and your willingness to operate alone in hostile territory. This assessment was their way of evaluating whether you could work with conventional special operations forces. Emma's head snapped toward him. Nobody told me that. Need to know. You needed to perform naturally without the pressure of knowing you were being evaluated for a real operational assignment. So this whole thing was a setup. This whole thing was an opportunity, Thornton corrected. And you've passed with the highest marks I've ever given. But there's still one problem. Sir, your shoulder. I watched you favor it all day. I saw how you compensated during the obstacle course. I watched you wince when you raised your weapon during the exercise. That's not a temporary injury, is it? Emma looked down at her hands. No, sir. The gunshot damaged the rotator cuff. Surgery repaired most of it, but I've lost about 20% of my range of motion and 30% of my grip strength in that arm. Can you still operate? I've been operating with it for 8 months, sir. I've adapted. Adapted, Torres repeated. That's what you call it. That's what the physical therapist called it, Master Chief. I call it learning to do my job with the body I have instead of the body I used to have. Thornton stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the training compound where other candidates were preparing for their exercises. I spent 28 years in the teams. I've seen hundreds of operators come through. Hell, I've been one. And I've watched injury after injury force good people out of the field. Hip replacements, back surgeries, traumatic brain injuries. Eventually, your body betrays you. That's the price we pay. Sir, if you're saying I'm not physically capable, I'm saying you're 23 years old, and you've already accumulated injuries that would retire a 40-year-old operator. I'm saying that charging armed opponents with a damaged shoulder is the kind of calculated risk that works until it doesn't. I'm saying that I watched you have a nightmare last night. Yes, Lieutenant, the female barracks aren't as soundproof as you think, and I'm wondering if you're psychologically capable of continuing field operations. Emma stood up. Sir, with respect, you don't get to make that determination. My psych evaluations are current, my medical clearances are valid, and my performance speaks for itself. Your performance today was outstanding. Your performance last night screaming in Dari at 300 hours was concerning. I have bad dreams, Colonel. Show me an operator who doesn't. I've seen bad dreams, Lieutenant. What you have is PTSD. Diagnosed and treated, sir. I see a therapist twice a week. I take medication when necessary. I manage it. You manage it until you don't, Cross interjected quietly. Emma, I was your handler. I sent you into Afghanistan. I made the call to use you despite your age. And when you came back broken, when I visited you in Walter Reed and saw what they'd done to you, I swore I'd never put you in that position again. That's why I supported the agency's decision to pull you from field operations. Emma's voice went cold. You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone has to. You're not capable of making it yourself. You're addicted to operational work. You need the adrenaline, the purpose, the sense of mission. You'd rather die in the field than live safely behind a desk. Maybe that's true. Maybe I would rather die doing something that matters than live doing nothing at all. Maybe that's my choice to make. The room fell silent again. Thornton finally spoke. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to complete this assessment. Based on your performance today, you'll pass. Then you're going to meet with the Joint Task Force commanders, and they're going to decide whether you're suitable for the operational role they have in mind. But I'm also requiring that you undergo a full psychological evaluation by the Navy's Special Warfare Psychologist, not the CIA's therapist who tells you what you want to hear. A real evaluation. And if I refuse, then you're disqualified right now and you go back to your desk job at SOCOM headquarters. Your choice, Lieutenant. Emma felt trapped. Every instinct told her to refuse to walk away to maintain control over her own decisions. But Cross was right about one thing: she was addicted to operational work. And if this assessment was her ticket back into the field, she'd accept whatever conditions came with it. I'll do the evaluation, sir. Good. Dismissed. You've got the rest of the day to recover. Tomorrow's assessment is water operations. I suggest you ice that shoulder and get some actual sleep. Emma saluted and walked out. Hammond was still standing in the hallway, his face pale. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. Forget it, Captain. I can't forget it. I mocked you. I questioned your leadership, and you've done more combat operations than I'll do in my entire career. Emma kept walking. I said forget it. She made it back to the female barracks before her hands started shaking again. Torres and Chen were there, and they saw immediately that something was wrong. Emma, what happened? Torres asked. They know. About Afghanistan, about the CIA, about everything. Is that bad? I don't know. Maybe. Thornton wants me evaluated by a Navy psychologist. Thinks I'm too traumatized to operate. Chen sat down beside her. Are you too traumatized? Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. Probably, but I'm also the best at what I do, and I'm not ready to stop doing it. What do you want? Emma, really want? That was the question, wasn't it? What did she want? To prove herself to Thornton, to get back into field operations, to honor her dead teammates, to outrun the nightmares that followed her every night. I want to be useful, Emma said finally. I want to know that what happened to me, all the pain and the scars and the trauma, I want it to mean something. I want it to have been worth it. Torres put a hand on her shoulder, the good one. Then make tomorrow count. Show them what you can do when you're not hiding who you are. Emma nodded, but sleep didn't come easy that night. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. The hostage rescue had been flawless. Her tactics had been perfect. But Thornton's words kept echoing. Eventually, your body betrays you. At 02:45 hours, the nightmares came again. This time, she didn't scream. She'd learned to suffer silently. The Navy psychologist's name was Dr. Catherine Wells, and she had eyes that missed nothing. Emma sat across from her in a small office at the base medical facility, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully blank. Lieutenant Carson, do you know why you're here? Colonel Thornton ordered a psychological evaluation. That's the official reason. What do you think is the real reason? Emma's jaw tightened. Because he thinks I'm unstable. Because he watched me have a nightmare and decided I'm too damaged to operate. Am I what? Unstable, damaged, too broken to do my job? Any of those. Emma met her eyes. I have PTSD. I have nightmares. I have triggers that sometimes catch me off guard. But I also have 3 years of successful operations since my capture. I've completed missions that operators twice my age couldn't handle. My trauma hasn't stopped me from performing. Dr. Wells made a note. Tell me about the nightmares. They're about Afghanistan, about the 47 days. Every night, most nights. What happens in them? Emma's hands curled into fists. I'm back in the room, the one with the concrete floor. They're asking me questions I can't answer. And then, she stopped. And then they hurt me until I can't remember what my own name is. Dr. Wells set down her pen. Emma, I've read your file. The parts that aren't classified anyway. You were tortured for 47 days. You experienced burns, beatings, electrical shock, waterboarding. You watched your teammates die. You escaped by killing 3 men with your bare hands. And you walked 40 kilometers through hostile territory with injuries that should have killed you. I know what happened to me. I was there. My point is that anyone who survived what you survived would have PTSD. The question isn't whether you're damaged. The question is whether you're functional. I am functional. You charged 3 armed instructors yesterday without hesitation. That's not tactical thinking. That's combat response conditioning. It worked. It worked in a training exercise. What happens when it doesn't work? What happens when your body reacts before your brain can assess the situation? Emma leaned forward. Doctor, I spent 18 months running solo operations after my capture. I infiltrated terrorist compounds. I extracted hostages. I gathered intelligence that saved American lives. If my combat responses were a liability, I'd be dead by now. You almost died in Syria. Almost doesn't count. It counts to the people who care about you. Dr. Wells paused. Do you have people who care about you? Emma family friends. A support network outside of operational work. The question hit harder than Emma expected. She thought about her parents still doing aid work in Africa who she hadn't spoken to in 8 months. She thought about her sister in Boston who didn't know what Emma really did for a living. She thought about Cross who cared but also felt guilty. She thought about the teammates who died in Afghanistan who would have cared if they were still alive. I have colleagues, Emma said finally. Colleagues aren't the same as support. They're what I have. Dr. Wells studied her for a long moment. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Not what you think I want to hear. Not what will get you back into the field. The truth. Fine. Do you want to die, Emma? The silence stretched between them. Emma opened her mouth to deny it, to say of course not, to perform the expected response of a healthy, functional operator. But something in Dr. Wells's eyes stopped her. I want to matter, Emma said quietly. I want my life to have purpose. And right now, the only thing that gives me purpose is operational work. So if you're asking whether I'd rather die doing something meaningful than live doing nothing at all, the answer is yes. But that's not the same as wanting to die. Isn't it? No, I'm not suicidal, doctor. I'm just honest about my priorities. Dr. Wells made another note. You're 23 years old. You've already accumulated more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. You have physical injuries that will affect you permanently, and your entire sense of identity is wrapped up in being an operator. What happens when your body can't do this anymore? What happens when age or injury forces you out of the field? I don't think about that. Maybe you should. Maybe I'll worry about that when it happens. Right now I'm focused on the mission in front of me. The evaluation continued for another hour. Dr. Wells asked about Emma's childhood, her parents, her decision to join the CIA at 18. She asked about Afghanistan in clinical detail, pushing Emma to describe things she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. She asked about Syria, about the hostages Emma had saved, about the one she hadn't. By the end, Emma felt like she'd been through another interrogation. My recommendation, Dr. Wells said finally, is that you're fit for duty with ongoing psychological support. Your trauma responses are within acceptable parameters for someone with your experience. You're not delusional, you're not actively suicidal, and you're capable of rational decision-making under pressure. But I'm also recommending continued therapy, regular check-ins, and close monitoring of your stress levels. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. My recommendation is just that, a recommendation. The final decision is up to Colonel Thornton and the Joint Task Force commanders. And there's something else you should know. What? I've been doing this for 15 years. I've evaluated hundreds of special operators. You're one of the most capable people I've ever assessed, but you're also one of the most vulnerable. The same traits that make you exceptional, your willingness to sacrifice your tolerance for pain, your ability to compartmentalize trauma, those same traits could destroy you if you're not careful. I'll be careful. I hope so. Because the world needs people like you, Emma. Don't throw yourself away just to prove a point. Emma walked out of the medical facility feeling drained. The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the base. She had passed the evaluation. She was cleared for duty. So why did she feel like she'd lost something in that room? Her phone buzzed. A text from Master Chief Vega, report to Building 7. Urgent briefing, all assessment candidates. Something had changed. Emma could feel it in the way the other candidates looked at her when she entered the briefing room. The mockery was gone, replaced by something else. Fear, maybe, or awe. Or the kind of respect that came with realizing someone had survived things you couldn't imagine. Thornton was standing at the front of the room with Master Chief Torres and two men Emma didn't recognize. One was wearing Army Colonel insignia, the other Navy captain. Both had the look of senior commanders who'd seen too much and slept too little. As of 1400 hours today, Thornton began, the inter-service assessment has been suspended. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. The room went silent. Assessment suspended. That meant something operational, something real. 4 American humanitarian workers have been kidnapped in Kunar Province, Afghanistan. They were operating under UN credentials near the Pakistani border when their convoy was ambushed. Afghan security forces were killed in the attack. The Americans were taken. Emma's blood went cold. Kunar Province. That was where she'd been held. That was where her team had died. That was where 47 days of hell had begun. The kidnappers are believed to be members of a Taliban splinter group operating out of a compound in the Korangal Valley. They're demanding a prisoner exchange and $50 million ransom. The deadline is 72 hours. The Army colonel stepped forward. I'm Colonel Frank Morrison, JSOC. The kidnappers made their demands directly to the State Department 6 hours ago. Negotiations are ongoing, but the President has authorized planning for a military rescue option. The Navy captain spoke next. I'm Captain David Reeves, Nisavbalers Group 1. We're putting together a joint task force to plan and potentially execute a hostage rescue. This briefing is to inform you that your assessment performance has been noted, and several of you may be tapped for operational roles. Emma's heart was pounding. A hostage rescue in the Korangal Valley. The same valley where she'd been captured, tortured, and nearly killed. The universe had a sick sense of humor. Questions, Thornton asked. Hammond raised his hand. Sir, what's the intelligence picture? Do we know where the hostages are being held? Morrison shook his head. Satellite imagery shows increased activity at 2 potential compounds. We're working to narrow it down, but the terrain and Taliban security make real-time intelligence difficult. Emma spoke before she could stop herself. Which compounds, sir? Every eye in the room turned to her. Morrison looked at Thornton, who nodded slightly. One is a former insurgent training facility about 5 kilometers north of the village of Shell. The other is a residential compound on the eastern slope of the valley near the Pakistani border. Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to hide the tremor. The second one, the residential compound. That's where they're holding the hostages. Morrison's eyes narrowed. How can you be certain? Because I spent 47 days in that compound 3 years ago, sir. I know every room, every guard position, every blind spot. I know where they held me. And if their procedures haven't changed, that's where they're holding the hostages now. The room erupted in murmurs. Thornton held up a hand for silence. Lieutenant Carson was a CIA paramilitary officer who was captured during an operation in the Korangal Valley. She has personal knowledge of the compound and its layout. She escaped after 47 days of captivity. Morrison stared at Emma. You escaped from that compound? Yes, sir. How? I killed 3 guards and walked out, sir. Then I walked 40 kilometers to friendly forces. The silence was absolute. Morrison exchanged a look with Reeves, then with Thornton. Lieutenant Carson, you just became the most valuable person in this room. Report to the skiff in Building 12 immediately. We need everything you remember about that compound. The sensitive compartmented information facility was a windowless room buried in the center of Building 12, secured by biometric locks and armed guards. Inside, intelligence analysts had assembled satellite imagery, intercept reports, and terrain maps covering the Korangal Valley. Emma stood in front of the main display screen, pointer in hand, walking through her memories like she was giving a combat briefing. In a way, she was. The compound is approximately 200 meters square, surrounded by a 10-foot wall with guard towers at the northeast and southwest corners. Main gate faces south toward the road. There's a secondary entrance on the western wall used for resupply, rarely guarded. How rarely? Morrison asked. When I was there, they checked it twice per day, dawn and dusk. The rest of the time, they relied on the wall and the tower guards. What about interior layout? Emma closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. The smell of the place came back first. Diesel fuel and smoke, blood and fear. Then the rooms arranged in her memory like a floor plan drawn in pain. Main building is 2 stories. Ground floor is storage and guard quarters. Second floor is where they hold prisoners. 3 rooms each, approximately 10 by 15 feet. The room I was held in was the easternmost corner position, single window facing the mountain. Why that room? Because it's the hardest to access from outside. Any rescue attempt would have to cross the entire compound, giving the guards time to execute the hostages or use them as shields. Can you draw the layout? Emma took a marker and began sketching on the whiteboard. Her hand was steady now, muscle memory taking over. She drew the outer walls, the gate positions, the main building, the guard towers. She marked the window of her cell, the stairway she'd used during her escape, the spot where she'd killed the first guard. The interrogation room is here, she said, marking a position on the ground floor. They brought me there every day for the first 3 weeks. Then they got bored and started coming to my cell instead. What kind of security measures inside the building? Basic locks. No electronic systems. They're relying on terrain and isolation, not technology. The valley is their security. Getting there is the hard part. Morrison studied the drawing. What about the guards? How many, what kind of weapons? When I was there, approximately 30 fighters rotated through the compound. Mix of AK-47s, PKMs, RPGs. Some had military training, former Afghan army who defected. Most were local fighters, disciplined, but not sophisticated. Commander leadership structure, Emma's voice went flat. The commander's name is Hafiz Qadir. He personally supervised my interrogations. He speaks English, educated in Pakistan, spent time in a British prison for immigration violations before returning to Afghanistan. He's intelligent, patient, and completely without mercy. He's still alive. I don't know, sir. But if he is, and if he's running this operation, the hostages are in serious danger. Qadir doesn't negotiate in good faith. He makes demands to buy time while he extracts whatever he wants from his prisoners. The ransom and prisoner exchange, those are delaying tactics. He's already interrogating the hostages. The room fell silent. Morrison turned to Reeves. We need to move fast. If she's right about the timeline, those hostages don't have 72 hours. They have maybe 48 before Qadir decides they're more valuable as propaganda than as bargaining chips. Agreed. I'm recommending we launch within 36 hours. What's the force composition? SEAL Team 6 for the assault element. CIA paramilitary officers for intelligence support. Combat controllers for air coordination. Approximately 40 operators total. Emma stepped forward. Sir, request permission to be included in the assault element. Both colonels turned to look at her. Morrison's expression was skeptical. Reeves looked like he'd expected this. Lieutenant, you're not a SEAL. You're not even an active CIA officer at the moment. No, sir, but I'm the only person in this room who's been inside that compound. I know the guard patterns, the blind spots, the best approach routes. I know where they'll put the hostages and how they'll defend them. I escaped from that compound. I can help take it down. You were tortured there for 47 days. Yes, sir. And you want to go back? Emma met his eyes. I need to go back, sir. 3 years ago, my team died trying to complete a mission. I was the only survivor. I spent 47 days in hell because of that mission. And then I walked away. I survived. But I left something behind in that compound. What did you leave behind? The part of me that believes in justice, sir. The part that believes bad people get what they deserve. Hafiz Qadir tortured me for 47 days and nothing happened to him. He's still there, still hurting people, still running his little kingdom of pain. Going back isn't about revenge. It's about finishing what I started. Morrison looked at Thornton. She's your candidate. Your call. Thornton was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. Dr. Wells cleared her for duty this afternoon. Her tactical skills are exceptional. Her knowledge of the target is irreplaceable. But I won't order her to do this. If she goes, it has to be her choice made with full understanding of the psychological risks. I understand the risks, sir. Do you? Because the last time you were in that compound, you came out with burns covering a third of your body and nightmares that still wake you up screaming. What happens if you're triggered during the assault? What happens if you freeze at the wrong moment? I won't freeze. You don't know that. I know myself, Colonel. I know what I can handle, and I know that if those hostages die because I wasn't there to help, I'll never forgive myself. Thornton studied her for a long moment. You're on the team. Intelligence liaison, not assault element. You'll brief the operators, provide real-time guidance during the approach, and coordinate from the Tactical Operations Center. Sir, I should be on the ground. That's not negotiable, Lieutenant. You're too valuable as an intelligence asset to risk in direct combat. And frankly, you're too emotionally compromised to be in the assault element. You'll support from the TOC, or you won't be part of this operation at all. Emma wanted to argue, but she recognized the steel in Thornton's voice. This was as far as he would bend. Yes, sir. I understand. Good. Briefing for all task force members at 0600 tomorrow. Get some sleep, Lieutenant. You're going to need it. Sleep didn't come. Emma lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through scenarios. The compound, the guards, the approach routes. Hafiz Qadir's face burned into her memory like a brand. The sound of his voice, asking questions in that calm, patient tone while her body screamed in agony. She was going back. Not to the compound itself, but close enough. Close enough to smell the mountains, to feel the cold Afghan air, to remember everything she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. At 0200 hours, her phone buzzed. A text from Cross heard about the operation. Are you sure about this? Emma typed back, no, but I'm doing it anyway. A pause, then I should never have let them recruit you. You were too young. I made my own choices. Did you? Or did we take advantage of a talented kid who didn't know what she was getting into? Emma didn't have an answer for that. She set the phone down and closed her eyes, willing herself to rest. The nightmares came at 03:30 hours. But this time they were different. Instead of being trapped in the compound, helpless and hurting, she was moving through it with purpose, room by room, guard by guard. She had a weapon in her hands and a mission in her heart. And when she reached the room where Hafiz Qadir was waiting, she didn't hesitate. She woke up at 0500 hours. Heart pounding, hands steady. Something had changed. The briefing room was packed with operators from 3 different commands. SEAL Team 6 members filled the front rows, their faces hard and focused. CIA paramilitary officers sat in the back, men Emma recognized from her time at Camp Peary. Combat controllers, intelligence analysts, communications specialists, the entire machinery of special operations assembled for a single mission. Emma stood at the front with Morrison, Reeves, and Thornton. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. The compound is located on the eastern slope of the Korangal Valley, elevation approximately 200 to 400 meters. Primary approach route is from the north following the ridgeline. Secondary approach from the west through the river valley. Both routes require approximately 4 hours of foot movement from the nearest viable helicopter landing zone. She walked them through the layout, the guard positions, the likely locations of the hostages. She described Hafiz Qadir's tactics, his psychology, his vulnerabilities. Qadir is arrogant. He believes his position in the valley makes him untouchable. He survived 3 previous raids by Afghan forces and 1 by American conventional units. Each time he had warning. Each time he used the hostages as shields until the attacking force withdrew. He'll do the same thing here, unless we move faster than he expects. A SEAL Team 6 operator raised his hand. How do we prevent him from using the hostages as shields? Simultaneous breach from multiple entry points. Don't give him time to react. The western entrance is the key. It's the least defended, closest to the building where the hostages will be held. A small Team 4 operators could breach the compound wall, neutralize the ground floor guards, and reach the second floor before Kadir knows what's happening. And you know this because I escaped through that entrance 3 years ago. I killed the guards on the ground floor. I know exactly how long it takes to move from the wall to the building. 43 seconds if you're moving carefully. 22 if you're running. The operator nodded slowly. You're the one who was captured. The one who walked out after 47 days. Yes. And you're going back. I'm supporting from the TOC. But yes, I'm going back. The room was silent for a moment. Then the operator spoke again. Ma'am, with respect, that takes serious guts. I've been doing this for 15 years. I don't know if I could go back to a place where I was tortured for 7 weeks. You could if there were lives at stake, petty officer. That's what we do. We go where we're needed, not where we're comfortable. The briefing continued for another 2 hours. By the end, every operator in the room knew the compound as well as Emma did. They knew the guard positions, the approach routes, the likely responses to different scenarios. They knew Hafiz Kadir's name, his face, his tactics. And they knew that a 23-year-old woman who weighed 115 pounds had survived things that would have broken most of them. As the operators filed out to begin equipment preparation, Master Chief Vega approached Emma. That was one hell of a briefing, Lieutenant. It wasn't hard. I've been replaying that compound in my head for 3 years. I know every inch of it. That's what worries me. Vega lowered her voice. You're too close to this. Too emotionally invested. What happens if we get there and find out the hostages are already dead? What happens if Kadir escapes? What happens if this mission goes sideways and you're watching it all fall apart from the TOC? Then I'll adapt and overcome, Master Chief. That's what I do. That's what you say. But I've seen operators break when things get personal. I've seen people with 10 times your experience lose it when the mission becomes about revenge instead of rescue. This isn't about revenge, isn't it? Emma met her eyes. 3 years ago, Hafiz Kadir broke every bone in my left hand because I wouldn't tell him my real name. He burned me with electrical cables because I wouldn't reveal my team's location. He waterboarded me until I forgot how to breathe normally. And then when he was done, he told me that I would die in that compound, that no one was coming for me, that I had been abandoned by my country. Vega said nothing. He was wrong, Emma continued. I didn't die. I escaped. And now I'm going back to prove that he was wrong about everything. That's not revenge, Master Chief. That's vindication. There's a thin line between vindication and self-destruction. I know. I've been walking it for 3 years. The task force deployed from Coronado at 2200 hours, flying east toward Afghanistan on a C-17 that had been stripped of seats and filled with equipment. Emma sat among the operators, her laptop open, reviewing the latest intelligence updates. The compound was active. Thermal imaging showed approximately 35 heat signatures, more than she'd estimated. The hostages were confirmed alive. Intercepted communications mentioned the American prisoners being prepared for a propaganda recording. That meant Kadir was planning to release a video, which meant he was planning to make demands to demonstrate his power, to show the world what happened to Americans who wandered into his territory. It also meant the hostages had value. For now. Rourke sat down beside her. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you volunteer for this? You could have stayed in California. Let someone else handle the intelligence briefings. Why put yourself through this? Emma closed her laptop. Because I spent 3 years wondering if I could face that compound again. Wondering if I was strong enough to go back to the place that almost destroyed me. And I realized that the wondering was worse than the doing. The fear of going back was worse than actually going. And now that you're actually doing it, now I feel like I'm finally finishing something I started. Like I'm finally taking control of what happened to me instead of letting it control me. Rourke was quiet for a moment. I hope you find what you're looking for, ma'am. So do I, Lieutenant. So do I. The C-17 droned on through the darkness, carrying 40 operators toward a valley that had haunted Emma's nightmares for 3 years. Somewhere ahead, 4 Americans were waiting for rescue. Somewhere ahead, Hafiz Kadir was waiting too. and Emma Carson was finally going home to the place that had almost killed her. The forward operating base in Jalalabad smelled exactly the way Emma remembered dust diesel fuel and the faint metallic tang of fear that never quite went away in a combat zone. She stepped off the C-17 into the Afghan night, and for a moment, 3 years collapsed into nothing. She was 19 again, stepping onto this same tarmac, believing she was invincible. She wasn't invincible. She'd learned that lesson in blood and fire. Carson TOC is this way. Master Chief Torres appeared at her elbow, guiding her through the organized chaos of a special operations staging area. Operators were checking equipment, reviewing maps, conducting final briefings. The machinery of war spinning up for another mission. The Tactical Operations Center was a reinforced building near the center of the base, packed with communications equipment, satellite feeds, and enough screens to make a movie theater jealous. Emma took her position at a workstation near the front, her laptop connected to the tactical network. "All call signs, this is Vanguard Actual," Colonel Morrison's voice came through her headset. "Final mission brief in 30 minutes. All operators to the main briefing room." Emma stood, but Torres put a hand on her shoulder. "You stay here. Start monitoring the feeds. We've got a drone over the compound now." The drone feed showed the compound exactly as Emma remembered it. The walls, the guard towers, the main building where she'd spent 47 days learning what human beings were capable of doing to each other. She watched as heat signatures moved through the structure, counting guards, tracking patterns. And then she saw him. Hafiz Qadir walked across the compound courtyard with the confident stride of a man who owned everything he surveyed. He was older now, grayer, but unmistakable. The way he moved, the way he held his shoulders, the way other men stepped aside when he approached. Emma's hands clenched involuntarily. "That's him," she said into her headset. "Positive identification on Hafiz Qadir. He's in the compound." Morrison's voice came back immediately. "Copy that. Confirms our intel. He's running this operation personally. Sir, request permission to brief the assault element on his likely behavior patterns. I know how he thinks. I know what he'll do when we hit the compound." "Granted. Get to the briefing room." Emma walked through the base on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her body was moving, functioning, doing what it needed to do. But her mind was 3 years away in a concrete room, listening to Qadir's calm voice, asking questions while pain exploded through her nervous system. The briefing room was packed. 40 operators, the best America had to offer, waiting to hear what she had to say. Emma walked to the front and the room fell silent. "Hafiz Qadir is a creature of habit." She began, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. "He conducts interrogations at night between 2200 and 0400 hours. He sleeps in the morning, never before dawn. He eats his main meal at noon. He prays 5 times daily, but never at the designated times. He adjusts based on his schedule, which means he prioritizes control over religion." "How does that help us?" a SEAL Team 6 operator asked. "It tells us when he'll be most alert and when he'll be most vulnerable. Right now, it's 0130 local time. He's probably awake, probably with the hostages. If we hit the compound at 0400, he'll be finishing whatever he started tonight. He'll be tired, distracted, less likely to respond quickly." "What about the hostages? What condition will they be in?" Emma's jaw tightened. "Depends on what he wants from them. If he's after information, they'll be hurt but alive. If he's making a propaganda video, he'll want them presentable. If he's already decided to kill them..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "Best guess. He's making a video." The intercepted communications mentioned preparation. That means grooming, staging, scripting. He wants the world to see his prisoners before he makes demands, which means they're alive, and they'll stay alive until he gets what he wants or decides he's not going to get it. Morrison stepped forward, which gives us approximately 18 hours before he changes his mind. We launch at 0345 local time. Assault element inserts by helicopter to a landing zone 4 kilometers north of the compound. 4-hour foot movement to the target. Simultaneous breach at 0800 hours. "Sir," Emma interrupted. 0800 is wrong." The room went quiet. Challenging a colonel's tactical decision in front of 40 operators was not a career-enhancing move. Explain. Morrison said, his voice flat. At 0800, the sun will be fully up. Kadir's guards change shift at dawn, which means fresh eyes on the perimeter. The morning prayer call happens at approximately 0530, which means the village below the compound will be awake and potentially hostile. And Kadir himself will be asleep, which means someone else will be making decisions, someone less predictable. So when do you suggest? 0445, just before dawn. The night guards are tired, the day guards haven't arrived yet. Kadir is finishing his night's work, which means he's in a known location, probably the interrogation room on the ground floor. The village is still asleep. Maximum advantage, minimum variables. Morrison looked at Reeves, then at Thornton. She knows this compound better than our satellite imagery. Adjust the timeline. Assault element inserts at 0300, breach at 0445. The operators began recalculating, adjusting, adapting. Emma felt a small surge of something that might have been pride. She was contributing. She was useful. Her trauma was finally serving a purpose beyond haunting her. One more thing, she said. The western entrance. That's the key to this whole operation. Kadir knows his compound is vulnerable from the south where the main gate is. He knows helicopters can approach from the north. But the western wall is built into a hillside and he believes it's too steep for a large force to approach. He's wrong. How do you know? Because I escaped through that entrance. I climbed that hillside in the dark, wounded, barely conscious. If I could do it in that condition, your operators can do it fresh and prepared. A four-man team through the western entrance simultaneous with the main assault from the south will split his defensive response and create confusion. That confusion is how we save the hostages before he can use them as shields. The lead SEAL Team 6 operator, a senior chief named Warren, nodded slowly. That's solid tactical thinking. Who taught you that? Hafiz Kadir did. He spent 47 days teaching me how he thinks. I learned everything I needed to know about his weaknesses while he was exploiting mine. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Warren spoke again. Ma'am, with respect, you should be in the assault element, not the TOC. Colonel Thornton disagrees. Colonel Thornton isn't wrong about your value as an intelligence asset, but he might be wrong about where that value is best applied. You know this compound. You know this enemy. Putting you in a bunker 4 kilometers away seems like a waste. Morrison shook his head. The decision stands. Lieutenant Carson is too valuable to risk in direct combat and too emotionally compromised to guarantee objectivity under fire. Sir, Warren began, the decision stands, Senior Chief. Lieutenant Carson will support from the TOC. End of discussion. The briefing concluded with final equipment checks and timeline confirmations. Emma returned to the TOC, her mind racing. Warren was right. She should be on the ground. She should be there when they breached the compound, when they found the hostages, when they encountered Kadir. But Morrison was right too. She was emotionally compromised. The possibility that she'd freeze, or worse, that she'd prioritize revenge over mission success was real. She'd been telling herself she could handle it, but could she really? Her phone buzzed. A text from Cross. I'm watching the drone feed from Langley. You okay? Fine. You're not fine. I can see your hands shaking from satellite imagery. Emma looked down. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't noticed. It doesn't matter. Mission comes first. Emma, if you need to step back, no one will blame you. I would blame me. I have to see this through. The hours crawled by. Emma monitored the drone feeds, tracking movement in the compound, counting guards, noting patterns. Everything matched her memory. The same shift changes, the same patrol routes, the same blind spots she'd exploited during her escape. At 0230 hours, the assault element loaded onto helicopters. Emma watched them go, feeling like she was watching part of herself fly away. 40 operators heading into the valley that had almost killed her. At 0300 hours, the helicopters reached the landing zone. All call signs, boots on ground, beginning foot movement to target. Emma tracked their progress on the tactical display, watching the blue icons creep across the map toward the compound. 4 kilometers of mountain terrain navigated in darkness by men carrying 60 pounds of equipment. The assault element moved in disciplined silence, their training evident in every step. At 0400 hours, something changed. Vanguard. Actual, this is Overwatch, the drone operator reported. We've got movement in the compound, multiple vehicles approaching the main gate. Emma's blood went cold. How many vehicles? 3 technicals, 1 SUV, approximately 20 additional fighters. That's reinforcements. Someone warned them. Morrison's voice came through the headset, sharp and urgent. All call signs hold position. We may be compromised. Emma studied the drone feed, her mind racing. The vehicles were stopping at the main gate. Men were getting out carrying weapons, moving into the compound. The guard force had just doubled. Sir, we can't abort, she said. If Kadir knows we're coming, he'll move the hostages. We'll lose them. And if we assault a compound with 60 fighters instead of 30, we'll lose operators. The western entrance is still viable. Those reinforcements are concentrating on the south and east, the directions they expect an attack from. A small team through the west can still reach the hostages before... Lieutenant, I appreciate your input, but this is a command decision. Sir, please. I know this compound. I know how Kadir thinks. He's not expecting an attack from the west. He's never expected an attack from the west. Those reinforcements are theater. He's showing strength, not preparing for a real fight. He thinks we'll see the extra fighters and back off. And how can you be certain of that? Because that's what he did when I was there. Afghan forces approached the compound twice during my captivity. Both times he brought in extra fighters, made a show of force, and the Afghans withdrew. He's using the same playbook. Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then, Warren, you copy this? Senior Chief Warren's voice came through the tactical net. Copy that, sir. I agree with the lieutenant. The western approach is still viable. 4-man team can breach, while the main element creates a diversion from the south. Classic feint and strike. You're volunteering for the western breach. Yes, sir. Me, Petty Officer Chen. Petty Officer Alvarez and... Warren paused. And I'm requesting Lieutenant Carson join my team. Emma's heart stopped. Absolutely not, Morrison said immediately. Sir, with respect, she knows the interior layout better than any of us. She can navigate to the hostages faster than we can with maps and satellite imagery. And she's got personal motivation to make sure this mission succeeds. Personal motivation is exactly why she shouldn't be there. Sir, I've been doing this for 18 years. I know the difference between an operator who's compromised and an operator who's driven. Lieutenant Carson is driven. Put her with me, and I'll make sure she doesn't do anything stupid. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Emma gripped her workstation, barely breathing. Finally, Morrison spoke. Lieutenant Carson, are you willing to join the Western Breach team? Yes, sir. Are you capable of following orders even if those orders conflict with your personal feelings about the target? Yes, sir. Warren, she's your responsibility. If she becomes a liability, you extract her immediately. Understood. Understood, sir. Carson, get to the helicopter pad. You're linking up with Warren's team at the staging point. Emma was moving before Morrison finished speaking. She grabbed her gear from the TOC, checked her weapon, and ran toward the helicopter pad where a single MH-6 Little Bird was warming up. The pilot gave her a thumbs up as she climbed aboard. The flight to the staging point took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of watching the mountains pass beneath her, thinking about what she was about to do. She was going back. Not just to the valley, not just to the compound, but to the room where she'd learned what fear really meant. Warren was waiting when she landed. He handed her a tactical vest and a helmet without comment. We move in 10 minutes. Stay behind me, do exactly what I say, and don't shoot unless I tell you to. Clear. Clear, Senior Chief. One more thing. Warren's voice softened slightly. Whatever happens in there, you're not alone this time. We've got your back. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. The approach to the compound took 47 minutes. 47 minutes of climbing the same hillside Emma had descended 3 years ago, bleeding and broken, and certain she was going to die. The terrain was exactly as she remembered: loose rock, steep angles, minimal cover. But this time she wasn't alone. This time she was armed. This time she was hunting instead of being hunted. They reached the western wall at 0438 hours. Vanguard Actual Bravo team in position, Warren whispered into his radio. Copy Bravo. Alpha team is in position at the southern gate. Assault begins on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The explosion from the southern gate was massive, designed to draw every guard in the compound toward the main entrance. Emma heard shouts, gunfire, chaos. Exactly as planned. Warren went over the wall first, moving with the fluid efficiency of 18 years' experience. Emma followed her shoulders, screaming in protest, but her hands steady on her weapon. Chen and Alvarez came after, covering their flanks. The western courtyard was empty. Every guard had run toward the explosion at the main gate. Move, Warren said. They crossed the open ground in seconds, reaching the main building's western entrance. The door was unlocked just as it had been when Emma escaped. Kadir's arrogance, his certainty that no one would approach from this direction, was about to cost him everything. Inside the building smelled exactly as Emma remembered. Concrete dust, sweat, fear. Hostages should be second floor, eastern corner, she whispered. Warren nodded. You know the way. Lead us. Emma moved through the corridors of her nightmares with a focus she hadn't known she possessed. Every step brought back memories. The interrogation room on her left, the guard quarters on her right, the stairway ahead, where she'd killed the first guard during her escape. But the memories didn't paralyze her. They guided her. They reached the second floor without encountering resistance. The guards were all focused on the main assault, just as predicted. Emma led the team toward the eastern corner, toward the room she'd spent 47 days trying to forget. And then she heard his voice. You should not have come here. Hafiz Kadir stepped out of a side room, an AK-47 in his hands, a calm smile on his face. Behind him, Emma could see the hostages, 4 Americans bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. Lieutenant Emma Carson, Kadir said, his English precise and cultured. I wondered if you would return. You were the only one who ever escaped from me. I have thought about that failure often. Warren's weapon came up, but Kadir's finger was already on the trigger. The barrel pointed at the nearest hostage. If you shoot, they die. If you move, they die. We are at what you Americans call a standoff, yes. Emma stepped forward, putting herself between Warren and Kadir. Let them go. Your compound is being overrun. There's no escape for you. Kadir laughed. There is always escape. These mountains have hidden warriors for centuries. You know this. You walked through them, broken and bleeding, and somehow survived. I have always wondered how. I was motivated. Yes. Hatred is a powerful motivator. Kadir's eyes never left hers. I see that hatred in you now. You want to kill me. You have dreamed of killing me. Yes. During those long nights in your comfortable American bed, you have imagined putting a bullet in my brain. Emma's hands tightened on her weapon. Every night. And yet you cannot. Because if you shoot, the hostages die. Because if you move, the hostages die. Because you are not a killer, Lieutenant Carson. You are a survivor. And survivors do what is necessary, even when it is distasteful. What are you suggesting? Kadir smiled. An exchange. You for them. Come with me, and I will release the hostages. Refuse, and we all die together in this room when my reinforcements arrive. Warren's voice came through Emma's earpiece. Carson, don't even think about it. We'll find another way. But Emma was already calculating. Kadir was standing in the doorway, his weapon covering the hostages. Behind him, the room had only one window facing east. If she could distract him, if she could get him to shift his aim for even a second. You tortured me for 47 days, she said, keeping her voice steady. You broke bones, burned my skin, tried to destroy my mind, and I survived. What makes you think I'd surrender to you now? Because you are not the same person you were 3 years ago. Kadir's smile widened. I can see it in your eyes. The fire that kept you alive in that room, it is dimmer now. You have been worn down by your own memories. You dream of this place, don't you? You wake up screaming, thinking you are still here. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. I spent 47 days learning your limits, your breaking points, your deepest fears. I know you better than you know yourself, and I know that you would sacrifice yourself for these strangers, because guilt is the one thing I could not torture out of you. The guilt of surviving when your teammates died. It has been eating you alive ever since. Emma felt the words hit like physical blows. He was right. He knew her. He'd spent 47 days inside her head, and the connection went both ways. But that meant she knew him too. "You're afraid," Emma said suddenly. "You're standing there acting confident, but I can see it. The way you're gripping that weapon, your knuckles are white. The way you keep glancing at the window, you're hoping your reinforcements are close. The way you offered an exchange instead of just killing us, you need a bargaining chip because you know you can't fight your way out." Kadir's smile flickered. "You've never been in this situation before," Emma continued. "You've never had American special operators inside your compound. You've never had your guard force overwhelmed. You've always been the one in control, and now you're not. And that terrifies you. You know nothing." "I know you," Emma said, taking a step forward. "I spent 47 days listening to your voice, studying your patterns, learning how you think. You told me I would die in this compound. You told me no one was coming for me. You were wrong about both, and you're wrong now." Warren's voice in her ear. "Carson, what are you doing?" Emma took another step. "You're going to put down that weapon. You're going to step away from the hostages, and you're going to surrender. Because you know what happens if you don't." "I kill them," Kadir said, but his voice was less certain now. "No, you don't. Because killing them means you have nothing left to bargain with. And without a bargaining chip, you're just another terrorist in a compound full of dead men. You'll spend the rest of your very short life in a black site being interrogated by people who learned their techniques from the same source you did. You're bluffing. I walked 40 kilometers through mountains with burns covering a third of my body. I killed 3 of your guards with a broken chair leg. I survived 47 days of your best efforts to break me. Do I look like someone who bluffs?" Kadir's eyes darted to the window, then back to Emma. She could see the calculation in his face, the recognition that his position was weaker than he'd admitted, the fear that she was right about everything. "Warren," Emma said quietly, "when I move, you take the shot. Carson, wait." Emma dropped her weapon and raised her hands. "I surrender." Kadir's face twisted with surprise and triumph. His weapon shifted toward Emma, away from the hostages, exactly as she'd planned. Warren's shot took him in the shoulder. Kadir spun his weapon, discharging into the ceiling. Emma was already moving, closing the distance between them before he could recover. She hit him low, driving him backward into the wall. His weapon clattered to the floor. Chen and Alvarez swept past them, securing the hostages. Warren advanced his weapon, trained on Kadir. Emma had Kadir pinned against the wall, her forearm across his throat. His eyes were wide with shock and pain, blood spreading across his shoulder. "You said I wasn't a killer," Emma breathed. "You were wrong about that too." But she didn't kill him. Instead, she stepped back, letting Warren take over. "Hafiz Kadir, you are being detained under authority of the United States military for crimes against American citizens. You have no rights. You will receive no trial. You will disappear into a hole so deep that even your own people will forget you existed." Kadir's face contorted with rage, but there was nothing he could do. Emma watched as Warren zip-tied his hands and hauled him to his feet. "Hostages secure," Chen reported. "Minor injuries, nothing life-threatening. They're okay to move." Emma turned to look at the 4 Americans. 2 men, 2 women, all in their 30s, all looking at her with a mixture of terror and gratitude. "You're safe now," she said. "We're taking you home." The extraction took 19 minutes. Alpha Team had secured the compound, eliminating or capturing the remaining fighters. Helicopters landed in the courtyard, loading hostages and operators for the flight back to Jalalabad. Emma rode in the same helicopter as Kadir, watching him across the cabin. His face was pale from blood loss, his eyes filled with hatred. "This is not over," he said. "Yes, it is," Emma replied. "For you, it's been over for 3 years. You just didn't know it." The sun rose over the Hindu Kush as the helicopters crossed back into friendly territory. Emma watched the light spread across the mountains, painting them gold and rose, and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years: peace It wouldn't last. The nightmares would come back. The memories would never fully fade. But for this moment, in this helicopter with Hafiz Qadir in restraints and 4 Americans going home, Emma Carson felt like she had finally finished what she started. Senior Chief Warren sat down beside her. "That was a hell of a gamble, Lieutenant. Dropping your weapon like that." "It wasn't a gamble. I knew he'd take the bait. He couldn't resist the opportunity to capture me again. His ego wouldn't let him." "You know him that well." "I know him better than I know myself. He made sure of that." Warren was quiet for a moment. "What you did in there that took more courage than anything I've seen in 18 years of operations. You faced the man who tortured you, used his own psychology against him, and saved 4 lives. That's not just tactical skill. That's something else entirely." "What's that, Jay?" "Strength, Lieutenant. Real strength. The kind that doesn't come from muscles or training. The kind that comes from surviving things that should have destroyed you." Emma looked out the window at the mountains falling away below them. "I used to think strength meant not being afraid. Now I know it means being terrified and doing the job anyway. That's the truest thing anyone's ever said about combat." The helicopter banked toward Jalalabad and Emma closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she could still see Qadir's face, the shock when he realized she'd outmaneuvered him, the rage when Warren took him down. She'd remember that face for the rest of her life, just like she remembered the face he'd shown her during 47 days of torture. But now when she remembered, she would also remember this moment. The moment she'd won. The moment she'd proven that he hadn't broken her after all. The compound was behind her. The hostages were safe, and Hafiz Qadir would spend the rest of his life in the same kind of concrete room where he'd tried to destroy her. Just as Emma thought. This is what justice feels like. The debrief at Jalalabad lasted 6 hours. Emma sat in a windowless room recounting every moment of the assault to a panel of senior officers, intelligence analysts, and lawyers who seemed more interested in liability than heroism. She answered their questions with the same clinical precision she'd used during her intelligence briefings, detaching herself from the emotions that threatened to surface every time she described the compound. The confrontation with Qadir, the moment she'd dropped her weapon and gambled everything on her understanding of a monster. "You surrendered your weapon to a known terrorist," one of the lawyers said, his tone accusatory. "That's a violation of at least 3 operational protocols." "It was a tactical decision, sir. Qadir had the hostages covered. Standard engagement would have resulted in civilian casualties. By surrendering my weapon, I redirected his attention and created an opening for Senior Chief Warren to neutralize the threat." "You couldn't have known he would take the bait." "I spent 47 days learning how he thinks, sir. I knew." The lawyer opened his mouth to argue, but Colonel Morrison cut him off. Lieutenant Carson's actions resulted in 4 American hostages recovered alive and the capture of a high-value target who's been on our kill list for 5 years. Whatever protocol she violated, the outcome speaks for itself. The debrief ended at 1400 hours. Emma walked out into the Afghan sun, exhausted but alive, and found Senior Chief Warren waiting for her. "How'd it go?" "The lawyers don't like me." Warren laughed. "The lawyers never like anyone who actually gets things done. You hungry?" "Starving." They ate in the base mess hall, surrounded by operators who nodded at Emma with a respect she wasn't used to receiving. Word had spread about what happened in the compound. The small woman who'd been mocked at Coronado was now the operator who'd faced down Hafiz Qadir and walked away victorious. "What happens now?" Emma asked between bites. "Now we fly back to the States. There'll be more debriefs, more paperwork, probably some kind of ceremony. The brass loves ceremonies." "I meant what happens to me, to my career." Warren set down his fork. "That depends on what you want. The Joint Task Force still needs operators. Morrison was impressed enough that he's probably going to offer you a permanent slot. And Colonel Thornton's been singing your praises to anyone who'll listen." "Thornton. The same Thornton who laughed at me during the PT test." "The same one. Turns out he's got a talent for admitting when he's wrong. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, he commits fully." Emma didn't know how to process that. 3 weeks ago, Thornton had publicly humiliated her in front of 200 operators. Now he was advocating for her career. The military was strange. There's something else, Warren said, lowering his voice. The hostages asked about you. They want to meet you before they're evacuated. Emma's stomach tightened. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why not? Because I'm not a hero, Senior Chief. I did a job, that's all. You saved their lives. They disagree about the hero part. An hour later, Emma stood outside the medical facility where the 4 hostages were being treated. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else, something she couldn't quite name. She pushed through the door. The first hostage she saw was a woman in her mid-30s, blonde hair, tangled face bruised, but eyes bright with something that looked like hope. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, an agricultural specialist who'd been teaching farmers in Kunar province when the convoy was ambushed. You're her, Sarah said immediately. You're the one who came for us. I was part of the team, ma'am. Don't give me that. The SEALs told us what happened. You were captured in that same compound 3 years ago. You survived 47 days of torture, and you came back. Emma didn't know what to say. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. When they took us, when they put us in that room, I thought we were going to die. I thought no one was coming for us. And then you walked through that door and I knew we were going to survive. You would have survived regardless, ma'am. The assault team needed you. They told us that too. You knew things about that compound that no one else knew. You led them through the building. You faced the man who tortured you, and you didn't flinch. Emma's voice caught. I flinched, ma'am. I just didn't let it stop me. Sarah reached out and took Emma's hand. That's the definition of courage. Not being unafraid. Being afraid and doing it anyway. The other 3 hostages gathered around, each offering their own gratitude. David Chen, an engineer who'd been building water purification systems. Michael Torres, a medical volunteer who'd been running a clinic for women and children. And Linda Hayes, a journalist who'd been documenting the humanitarian work. You're what, 23 years old? Linda asked. Yes, ma'am. My daughter is 23. She's in college studying marketing. She can't decide what to do with her life. And you, Linda's voice broke. You've already saved more lives than most people save in a lifetime. I've also taken lives, ma'am. That's part of the job too. The lives you took were people who would have killed us. Don't apologize for that. Don't ever apologize for that. Emma stayed with the hostages for an hour, listening to their stories, answering their questions, accepting their gratitude, even though it made her uncomfortable. When she finally left, she felt different, lighter somehow. Like a weight she'd been carrying for 3 years had finally been lifted. The flight back to the United States took 22 hours. Emma slept for most of it, and for the first time in 3 years, the nightmares didn't come. She dreamed of mountains and sunrise and the sound of helicopter rotors carrying her away from the compound that had haunted her for so long. She woke up as the plane descended toward Andrews Air Force Base and found Master Chief Vega sitting beside her. How do you feel? Tired, sore. My shoulder hurts like hell. You dislocated it again during the assault. The medics popped it back in while you were unconscious on the helicopter. Emma hadn't even noticed. That explains the pain. You're going to need surgery. Real surgery this time, not just physical therapy. The doctors say the joint is too damaged to keep compensating. And after surgery, 6 months of recovery, maybe longer. You might not regain full function. Emma looked out the window at the American landscape passing below them. That's a lot of might. It's the best they can tell you right now. Your body's been through hell, Emma, multiple times. At some point, you have to let it heal. And if the surgery doesn't work... Vega was quiet for a moment. Then you find a new way to serve. There are plenty of roles in special operations that don't require you to kick down doors. Intelligence training planning, your knowledge, your experience that doesn't go away just because your shoulder does. I don't know how to do anything else. Then you learn. The same way you learn to survive torture, the same way you learn to escape from an enemy compound, the same way you learn to face Hafiz Qadir and not flinch. You adapt. That's what you do. The plane landed at 0600 hours local time. Emma walked down the ramp into the gray morning light and found a delegation waiting for her. Colonel Morrison, Captain Reeves, Master Chief Torres, and standing slightly apart from the others, Colonel Ryan Thornton. Lieutenant Carson, Morrison said formally, on behalf of Joint Special Operations Command, I want to thank you for your service during Operation Mountain Dawn. Your contribution was instrumental in the successful rescue of 4 American hostages. Thank you, sir. There will be a formal recognition ceremony at the Pentagon in 3 weeks. You're expected to attend. Yes, sir. Morrison and the others moved on, heading toward waiting vehicles, but Thornton stayed behind. Lieutenant, a word. Emma followed him away from the others, her guard still up despite everything that had happened. Old habits died hard. Thornton stopped walking and turned to face her. His expression was unlike anything she'd seen from him before. No mockery, no skepticism, no challenge, just respect. I owe you an apology, he said. Sir, I owe you a real apology, not the one I gave you back at Coronado when I was still processing what I'd learned about you. A real apology for the way I treated you from the moment you arrived. Emma waited. I've spent 28 years in special operations, Thornton continued. I've seen hundreds of operators come through, and I thought I knew how to evaluate them. Physical strength, mental toughness, tactical ability. I had a system, and that system told me that someone who looked like you couldn't possibly belong in our world. You weren't entirely wrong, sir. I don't belong in your world. No, you don't. You belong in a different world, a harder world, a world I didn't even know existed. The things you've done, the things you've survived, I couldn't have done them. Not at your age, maybe not at any age. Emma didn't know how to respond. When I laughed at you during the PT test, I was laughing at my own assumptions. I was laughing because I couldn't process the possibility that I'd misjudged so completely. That's not an excuse. It's an explanation. And I'm sorry. Apology accepted, sir. Thornton nodded slowly. There's something else. I've spoken with Morrison and the task force commanders. They're offering you a permanent position as intelligence liaison for special operations missions in the Afghanistan and Pakistan theater. It's a field role, but with your injuries, you'd be running operations from forward bases rather than kicking down doors. And you support this. I recommended it. Your knowledge of enemy tactics, your language skills, your ability to think like the opposition, that's invaluable. We need people like you, Lieutenant. People who understand that the war isn't just about killing terrorists. It's about understanding them. Emma thought about what Vega had said on the plane. You adapt. That's what you do. I'll consider it, sir. Take your time. Get your surgery. Recover. The job will be waiting when you're ready. Thornton walked away, leaving Emma standing alone on the tarmac. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and she realized that she'd been awake for almost 30 hours. But she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cross saw the after-action report. You did good, kid. I'm not a kid anymore. No, you're not. You haven't been for a long time. Emma typed back. What happened to Kadir Blacksite? Undisclosed location. He'll be there for the rest of his life. Good. Emma, I need to tell you something. The mission that got you captured, Operation Copper Dagger, I approved it. I knew the risks. I knew you were young, and I sent you anyway. That's haunted me for 3 years. Emma stared at the phone. Cross had been her handler, her mentor, the man who'd recruited her and trained her and sent her into the field. She'd never blamed him for what happened in Afghanistan. She'd never thought to. You didn't torture me, James. Kadir did. You gave me a mission. I chose to accept it. You were 18 years old. You weren't old enough to make that choice. I was old enough to survive. That's what matters. There was a long pause before Cross responded. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I'm still learning what that means. The recognition ceremony at the Pentagon was 3 weeks later, and Emma stood in a room full of generals and politicians and senior officials wearing her dress uniform with her shoulders still in a sling. The surgery had been successful, but recovery was slow. The doctors said she might regain 80% of her previous function. Maybe 90% if she was lucky and disciplined about her physical therapy. 80%. she could work with 80%. Lieutenant Emma Carson for extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy of the United States, you are hereby awarded the Navy Cross. Emma stepped forward as the Secretary of Defense pinned the medal to her uniform. The audience applauded, but she barely heard them. Her eyes were on the faces in the front row, Master Chief Vega Sr., Chief Warrant Colonel Morrison, and sitting slightly apart from the military contingent, the 4 hostages she'd helped rescue. Sarah Mitchell was crying. Linda Hayes was smiling. The Navy Cross is the second highest military decoration for valor, the Secretary continued. It is rarely awarded and represents the highest traditions of service and sacrifice. Lieutenant Carson's actions in Afghanistan exemplify the courage and commitment that define American Special Operations Forces. Emma accepted the medal, saluted, and returned to her seat. The ceremony continued with other recognitions, other awards, other heroes. But Emma barely noticed. She was thinking about the compound, the confrontation with Kadir, the 47 days that had shaped everything she'd become. She was thinking about the girl she'd been at 19, so eager to prove herself that she'd volunteered for a mission that nearly killed her. And the woman she'd become at 23, still eager to prove herself, but now understanding what that actually meant. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Emma stood near the edge of the room, uncomfortable with the attention, wishing she could disappear into the crowd. But the crowd kept finding her. Lieutenant Carson, I wanted to meet you. Emma turned to find a woman in her 50s approaching, elegant, composed, with the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime in positions of authority. Her name tag identified her as Deputy Director Catherine Wells, CIA. Ma'am? I read your file, the unredacted version. I didn't know there was an unredacted version. Wells smiled thinly. There's always an unredacted version, Lieutenant. It's just a matter of who has access. I've been following your career since Copper Dagger. You impressed me then. You've impressed me even more now. Thank you, ma'am. I want to make you an offer. The agency is establishing a new unit specifically focused on hostage rescue intelligence. We need someone who understands captivity from the inside, who can brief operators on what hostages experience, who can help us understand how captors think and behave. I believe you're uniquely qualified for that role. Emma's heart quickened. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose, a way to use everything you've learned, everything you've survived, to help others. Not just through individual missions, but through systemic change. Training programs, intelligence protocols, policy recommendations. The kind of work that saves lives for decades, not just days. What about the Joint Task Force position, Colonel Morrison? Morrison knows about this offer. He supports it. You'd still work closely with Special Operations, but your primary mission would be making sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. Emma thought about the hostages, the fear in their eyes, the gratitude when they realized they were being rescued. She thought about the countless other Americans being held captive around the world, waiting for someone to come for them. I'll need time to consider it, ma'am. Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. There are people who need you, Lieutenant. People who don't know it yet. Wells walked away, leaving Emma standing alone with her new medal and her racing thoughts. 6 months later, Emma stood in a training facility at Camp Peary, facing a room full of young CIA officers who'd just completed their basic training. They were the same age she'd been when she was recruited, 18, 19, 20 years old, eager, naive, convinced they were ready for anything. My name is Lieutenant Emma Carson, she began, and I'm going to tell you about the worst 47 days of my life. She told them about Afghanistan, about the ambush that killed her team, about the capture, the interrogation, the torture. She described the techniques Kadir had used, the psychological manipulation, the physical pain. She explained how she'd survived not through strength or courage, but through stubbornness. Through the refusal to give up, even when giving up seemed like the only rational choice. And then she told them about going back. 3 years after my escape, I returned to the compound where I was held. I faced the man who tortured me, and I helped rescue 4 Americans who were being held in the same room where I'd been broken down and built back up. The young officers stared at her, their faces pale. I'm telling you this not because I want you to be impressed or grateful or afraid. I'm telling you because some of you will end up in situations like mine. Some of you will be captured, interrogated, tortured. Some of you won't survive. And the ones who do survive will spend the rest of their lives trying to understand what happened to them. She paused, letting the words sink in. But here's what I need you to understand. Survival isn't about being strong or brave or special. It's about being stubborn. It's about refusing to quit, even when quitting seems like the only option. It's about finding something, anything to hold on to when everything else is being stripped away. What did you hold on to? One of the young officers asked. Emma thought about the question. About the 47 days in the compound, the escape, the long walk through the mountains, the years of recovery and nightmares and uncertainty. I held on to the knowledge that I had chosen this life. Not my parents, not my recruiters, not my handlers. Me. I chose to serve. I chose to accept the risks. And I chose to survive because giving up would have meant that my choice didn't matter. That all the training, all the sacrifice, all the pain, it would have been for nothing. She looked around the room at the young faces watching her. You've all made the same choice. You've chosen to serve your country in one of the most dangerous ways possible. That choice will be tested. Maybe not in the way mine was tested, but it will be tested. And when that moment comes, you need to remember why you made it. Not the idealistic reasons you told your recruiter, the real reasons, the ones you don't talk about. What were your real reasons? Another officer asked. Emma smiled. I wanted to prove that I was more than what people saw when they looked at me. I was small young female. Everyone assumed I couldn't handle the hard stuff. I wanted to prove them wrong. Did you? I'm standing here, aren't I? The training session lasted another 2 hours. Emma walked them through interrogation resistance techniques, psychological survival strategies, the importance of maintaining hope, even in hopeless situations. She answered their questions with the same honesty she'd shown during her own debrief, holding nothing back. When it was over, one of the young officers approached her. Lieutenant Carson, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Do you regret it? Any of it? Emma considered the question. The scars on her body, the nightmares that still came, sometimes the relationships she'd sacrificed for her career. The 47 days that had changed everything about who she was and who she would become. I regret that my team died, she said finally. I regret that I couldn't save them. I regret that there are still people being held captive around the world. People we can't reach, people we don't even know about. But do I regret the choices I made? No. Those choices led me here, and here I can make a difference. The young officer nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. Emma walked out of the training facility into the Virginia afternoon. Her shoulder ached. It always ached now, but she'd learned to ignore it. She'd learned to ignore a lot of things that used to matter. Her phone buzzed. A message from Senior Chief Warren, new mission briefing tomorrow. Hostage situation in Syria. Task force is assembling. You in? Emma typed back without hesitation. I'm in. She walked toward the parking lot, her stride confident, despite the ache in her shoulder. Behind her, the training facility was already preparing for the next group of recruits, the next generation of officers who would learn from her experience. 3 years ago, Colonel Ryan Thornton had laughed at her during a PT test. He'd called her a child playing soldier. He'd assumed that her small size and young age meant she couldn't possibly belong in the world of special operations. He'd been wrong about everything. And now, Lieutenant Emma Carson was exactly where she belonged. Not because she was the strongest or the fastest or the most tactical, but because she was the one who had survived, the one who had come back, the one who had proven that the scars on her body were not signs of weakness, but evidence of strength. The sun was setting over Camp Peary, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Emma stopped at her car and looked back at the training facility, thinking about the young officers inside, thinking about the missions ahead, thinking about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained. Hafiz Kadir was rotting in a black site somewhere, paying for his crimes with every breath. The hostages she'd helped rescue were home with their families, rebuilding their lives. And Emma Carson was still serving, still fighting, still proving that the smallest soldiers sometimes cast the longest shadows. She got into her car and drove toward the next mission, the next challenge, the the next opportunity to make her choices matter. Behind her, the past was finally quiet. Ahead of her, the future was waiting. And Lieutenant Emma Carson was ready for whatever came next. Because wounded doesn't mean finished. It means evolved, adapted, stronger in ways that perfect soldiers could never understand. The girl who had been mocked became the woman who was feared. The survivor became the rescuer, and the ghost became legend.